Great, thank you. So my name's Gabe Harp. I work with Cell Press. I want to thank Letty for this invitation and maybe make a correction. I think she used the word expert in the intro, and I just want to say that I've already learned a ton from Alexa and Deirdre, and I don't view myself as a UX expert by any means, but I want to share the story of how we at Cell Press put personas to use for a very specific project, and I'm hoping that you'll learn from seeing sort of some of the things that we did well and some of the things that I would suggest we could improve on next time. A little bit of context. Cell Press, we publish 40 high-impact journals in the life and physical sciences. We're based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, across the river. I've been there for 12 years now. I started out as a copy editor, working really closely with authors and editors throughout the publication process. And that sort of sparked it. I really got a lot out of helping, especially the authors, develop features and tools and services that would benefit them and our broader customer group. So that sort of led to a transition into working with our product development team, and also this particular project that I'm going to share with you. So again, this is the story of how we put personas to use, kind of start to finish on a single project. And what we started with was an objective, and this is word for word from our 2013 kickoff. I had to dig up all the old files. And our mandate was to develop ideas for how to present our content to readers to facilitate and enhance scientific research. And essentially, what we're getting at is how can we present our journal content in a new and innovative way that will really help our broader community and further the endeavor of scientific progress that we're all engaged in. This is a broad mandate, by the way. So we decided to try putting personas to use to help us really answer this question. And what I should also add is that Cell Press is an imprint of Elsevier, which is a much larger publishing company. And so this was an opportunity for us to partner with a group within Elsevier, the user-centered design team. And what they did was they came to Cell Press and led us through actually a series of workshops with a group that represented all departments of Cell Press, because part of that was very important in that we were clear that we needed perspectives from across the entire company. And so what the user-centered design team did was they had already done a lot of work in actually developing a broad suite of personas that could be used across business units all over Elsevier. And they selected a subset of these personas that had the broadest overlap with the Cell Press user base. And so then in our first workshop, we basically sat down together and we looked at these base personas, as we called them. And we started to also talk about what we understood of our different user types or roles. So the postdocs, grad students, librarians, undergrads, and so on. And we really wrote down everything that we thought we knew about their likes and dislikes, what their motivations were, what their pain points were, what their aspirations were. And what we did was we sort of layered that level of sort of the internal Cell Press knowledge on top of those base personas that we had from the UCD team. But again, that piece of it was very much about what we knew or what we thought we knew. And one thing that was clear was that we also needed actual user input on this. So what we did was we developed a series of questions that were really focused on getting to understand in greater detail what sort of the day-to-day working life of these different personas was. So we did over 200 interviews using Cell Press staff from, again, across the company, and we did most of these by telephone, some by email, and some in person. And we then collated the results and used them to further flesh out this subset of personas so that we had basically taken this core group that the user-centered design team had come up with, and then we had added on the layer of cell-pressed knowledge about our users, and then on top of that, we fleshed out these personas with the actual feedback that we got from these interviews. And so this led to a final handful of personas, and you'll see some of them here. So we have a graduate student, Marisol, Carl, an assistant professor, Kathy, PhD researcher, Beth, a postdoc, Marion, institutional librarian, and Hamilton, head of lab. This is not all of them, but it's a pretty core group that we used. And what I'm going to do here is focus in the role play session on Beth, the postdoc. And the reason for that is that we did use all of these personas throughout, but postdocs, they are really, I don't want to say more important than our other personas, but what we understand through the publishing process is that they play a really critical role in producing the scientific article that we publish in our journals. They're often leading the experiments, writing the actual paper itself, and by and large they have sort of the most to gain or the most to lose in terms of their own careers with the outcomes of this research work. So that was one reason why we were really looking at the postdoc as a central figure, and the other is essentially that we're looking to innovate in terms of how we present our content, and the postdocs essentially represent the future of our scientific publishing audience, right? They're at the forefront. They're going to be the next generation of leaders. So we wanted to look at this sort of somewhat younger cohort in terms of shaping an innovative direction that we wanted to go in. So again, I won't read this one either in depth, but we have Beth here. She's an environmental postdoc at the University of Washington. She studies amphibian ecology, really likes frogs, really likes comic books. She takes care of her parents, who she jokingly calls her kids. She's the author of a few papers now, but again, is pretty early in her career. And just a few key points that stand out from our understanding of Beth. First, are two concerns. This concept of literature overload, which I think will be familiar to everyone in the room, and is really increasing by the day, and is really a pain point for this sort of generation of early career researchers, where they just have such an overwhelming amount of literature that they need to process in order to take their research in the next generation. And then figures are not always clear. This is referring to scientific figures, so the figures that appear in the research papers that we and others publish, and they've grown really increasingly complex over the years. They're often full page with multi-page captions. They have panels and sub-panels and sub-panels. Central piece of the scientific paper as a unit. And on a more positive note, Beth is really excited by the collaborative authoring opportunities that are beginning to emerge online. So this was our work in developing the personas. And from there we moved into the ideation process. And we started that by simply, as again a group in another workshop with this UCD team, we mapped out everything that we saw in the near-term publishing landscape. So changes that we could foresee or try to foresee in the next 5 years. So these are things like big data, changes to research metrics, funding challenges. And we really came up with several dozen ideas. And we then mapped each of them to the current SalPress strategic focus. So for each of these items, is it in our current scope? Is it in our wheelhouse? Or is it something that would actually, if we're going to pursue it, does it mean a fundamentally new direction for us strategically? And then we got to the really fun part, which was involving a lot of Sharpies and paper. And we sketched out over 20 concepts. We narrowed these down to what we saw as our top 4. We pitched them to our management team, Shark Tank style. And what emerged from this was essentially a mashup of 2 of them that focused on the concept of the scientific figure, which I mentioned earlier. And what you'll see here, you'll recognize, of course, the ubiquitous play button. And the idea was, okay, how can we think differently about actually presenting that concept of a scientific figure? How can we rethink fundamentally what it means in a way that will really provide kind of a new level of value to our user base? And as inspiration, we were thinking about, well, what's the experience that our users have, or that we ourselves have, when we go to a scientific conference and we see authors presenting their own work. You don't just see the full-page figure. You see them talking through piece by piece, often kind of passionately and in a very engaging way, what is at the heart of their work. And so that's essentially the concept that we were trying to capture here. And we moved from there into the product development cycle. And this involved generating a series of prototypes, first in-house with our own editorial teams, and then with authors, and then with authors again. And each time gathering feedback from real users. And this led to the launch last year of a feature that we call Figure 360. And it is, in 3 minutes or less, the authors providing an animated, narrated video walkthrough version of a standard figure. And that's essentially how we used personas from start to finish. Just to recap what that process was, we had our internal workshop, we conducted user interviews, we refined the personas, we moved into the ideation, and then from there into the product development. And I guess what I want to emphasize here is that, like, if you look at the outcome, I think it was a successful project and we got what we wanted out of the personas. But I think there's a lot that we could have done better. And I'll just highlight those as I wrap up here. And I'll be also very interested to get feedback on this, whether here or later. So one of the things that I would say we really didn't do, I'm using the word observation here, but I forget what term you used, Deirdre. Contextual inquiry. It's a much better word for it, maybe.
Observation is a valid method.
Yeah. All right. So, I mean, we talked to our users, we interviewed them, we emailed them, we looked at a lot of data to shape these personas, but as part of this project, at no point did we actually just go and sit down and not say anything and observe our users in their own environment. And I think that's a real lost opportunity because you can draw tremendous insight from doing that. Truly getting to know your personas, I think it's a big investment to create personas. It takes a lot of work, it costs a lot of money, and you want to really make sure you get the most out of it. And that means not just kind of stopping at the point where you have a SketchUp of your persona, but really kind of trying to treat them as somebody that you're getting to know, and then using throughout your company, not just in one instance, but across multiple projects. And the other piece, I would say maybe a word of caution here, is that there's a temptation, because personas are essentially fictional archetypes, there is the risk of putting your own assumptions on the personas. So I think only by sort of truly committing to knowing them can you avoid that step of putting your own, even subconscious assumptions on top of how you're using those personas. And lastly, but in the same vein, is commit to your personas. So again, it's a big investment, and you need to make sure that at every level of your company, you are committed to actually making use of these personas and really doing so in a rigorous way. And I think the example here is that, for instance, we stopped using our personas at the end of that ideation cycle. So we essentially put them on a shelf when we moved to the product development. And that's partly because we turned to gathering real user feedback during that step, but I actually think we should have been doing both and kind of balancing out the two perspectives. And lastly, in terms of committing to personas, it's not a one-time creation shot, right? So people change over time, and I think the personas need to continually evolve as well, and that actually means a commitment to ongoing investment, not just in terms of dollars, but just in terms of really thinking about getting to know your personas, and that means kind of getting to continually build them over time. So I don't think we're actually doing questions right now, but I put up my email address if you want to reach me later, but I'm sure we'll have a segment.
Time. Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.